Okay, so behind the oratory of the Louvre is the Palais-Royal. Now, the Palais-Royal is also where artisans of the king were living, and we find correspondence from David Henry Montandon from the 1830s, which indicate that he was trading with a Leroy, who was watchmaker to the king, and his address in the letters is recorded at Palais Royal number 13. So he would have been somewhere very close by, and the business did continue on after David Henry returned to Louvre from Paris, and he sent watches, as we see from the letters. So currently I'm at the restaurant of Le Cardinal on Boulevard Saint-Germain, and this district is very interesting part of Paris in that the ancient Abbey of Saint-Germain-des-Prés was the only area where foreign watchmakers were permitted to operate in. So many of these smaller streets along the district were areas that our original watchmakers during the 18th century were operating out of, and these were mainly Swiss and other foreign watchmakers. Therefore, we find David Montandon as having been in this district and also working together with his partner Yersan. Now, we do have later, after the turn of the century, this seems to have dissipated, and we do find watchmakers located in other districts, and such will be seen in the case of Montandon Paris. But I will continue with my beef bourguignon, and for those of you who are eating with me, I wish you a bon appetit.
So, at present I am at the Gare Saint-Lazare, and I'm headed to the village, the Ville d'Auray, which is adjacent to the place, the village of Chateau, where David Montandon was a frequent hunter, and this is the place where he was accused of homicide together with his apprentice, and apparently later released, as he did have children after this. This happened in 1776. But anyways, just an update. So currently I'm in the quarter where David François Montandon Orfèvre worked as a watchmaker. He received his watchmaking mastery in 1770. He was approved by the King of France's council, government, and he remained in the watch trade, both in orfèvrerie, that is in goldsmithing, and also in watchmaking. And he eventually started to work with Yersan, Jonas Louis Yersan, another Swiss individual, and the two spent time up until at least the French Revolution making watches. Now, David François Montandon is the earliest Montandon watchmaker who we still have examples of his work, and this makes him a very special watchmaker, that he is in this unique position as the oldest and documented Montandon watchmaker. And his time, circa the 1770s, is a very crucial time. This is before, this is during the Ancien Régime and before the revolution took place, and then the watch business also did change dramatically as a result. So I'm filming on location next to the Ile de Saint-Denis, and we have David Montandon functioning as a watchmaker between the Quai d'Orfèvre and also at the Rue Hurepoix, which is the current day
Place de Saint-Michel. So he was working here in the 18th century from the late 1770s until the early to mid 1780s. And he also was functioning at the temple area. Probably he was there first. This was an area that was specifically devoted for foreign traders, and they had a special area in the temple which was for their trading. However, that area, the entire temple area, was destroyed during the French Revolution, so it no longer exists. However, I will give a brief video of this area. Obviously, the places they were working in have been leveled and rebuilt, but at least we have the location where he was operating as a watch maker in Paris of the 18th century. And we see the Cathedral of Notre Dame and the churches being rebuilt, having suffered from a fire recently, but the work is going on rather nicely. The Seine River. So I'm on the Pont Saint-Michel, and the old Rue de Hurepoix would have been in this area here, and this is where David Francois Montandon was working originally, and I believe it was around 1779, but I will provide the street addresses and the dates. So this is where the old Quai d'Orfèvre begins, and this is the location of one of the trading spots of David Francois Montandon during the 18th century in Paris. Obviously, much of this has been rebuilt from the 18th century, but we do have the general location. So, coming to you from Versailles, and in the background we find a portrait of King Louis XVI. Now, Louis XVI's government was the instrumental cause of David Montandon moving into Paris watchmaking, since his government provided permission to work in Paris as a foreigner, as a watchmaker. So, thanks to the king. Of course, one of the reasons why David was permitted to work in watchmaking, it was because at the time there were very heavy taxations put on the watchmaking community in Paris, and David Montandon was part of a group of 40 individuals for whom an exception was made. Now, in the previous history, it had been very difficult to get into the system and obtain this permission. It required many, many years of schooling, and now with other professionals who had already this background, they were able to pay a certain amount and integrate into the watchmaking community. Now, they were helping to pay this very heavy taxation that the king had put on them, and this was to support, as we can see, the lush grounds here at Versailles, the royal lifestyle. So I'm in the Park of the Tuileries, and I'm headed towards the Louvre, where I have a meeting with a curator there who is responsible for one of the oldest Montandon watches, which the Louvre has in their collection. It's one of the oldest I've seen, probably the second oldest in Montandon watch history. So this is David Francois Montandon's watch with Jonas Louis Yersin, and this dates from approximately 1789, 1790, around that period. So just right up and before or at the very beginning of the French Revolution. So let's see how this goes. So, I just returned from the Louvre, the inside collection that they have, where the object of David Francois Montandon, gold montre ronde, is held in their collection, and I was able to touch the watch and inspect it, open the watch, and observe various different poinçons and markings. But it was a unique object. This is probably the second oldest, possibly the oldest, but most likely the second oldest Montandon watch object that we have knowledge of that is confirmed. And this was just an excellent experience that the Louvre staff was able to accommodate this research trip and provide this type of support. So kudos and thanks go out to them naturally. So that is the update from the Louvre, and I hope this is interesting. So the next watchmaker from the 18th century that I would like to discuss is Balthazar Montandon. Now, Balthazar Montandon arrived in France probably around 1790, 1791. It seems to be after the French Revolution had already begun. And he located in Clermont, which is current-day Clermont-Ferrand. Now, his business partner, he was required to work with a French watchmaker by the rules of the time, and the man with whom he worked was André Olfan. Now, Olfan was a Freemason and a Jacobin of the First Order, and it is very likely that Balthazar was also involved in these same circles. And indeed, at the very beginning of their partnership, it may have been that Balthazar was responsible for bringing watch movements and clock movements from the Geneva area or La Brevine in Switzerland. Now, this is rather interesting. André Olfan, whose daughter Balthazar did marry, now André's family had been involved from the mid-18th century in silks and textiles and this sort of thing. Now, they were originally out of the Geneva area, and they were involved in this importing. There were various different arrangements for these silks to be brought through the Kingdom of Savoy. And now we will discuss an interview. I will provide a snippet of an interview where I am speaking with an individual who is a very big specialist, shall we say. He's an expert in this period, specifically in the 18th century, and he knows the partnership extremely well. In fact, his ancestor was the mayor of Clermont-Ferrand, and he is the owner of a watch which was presented to the mayor by Balthazar Montandon and André Olfan. And this is one of the oldest Montandon watches, probably after the David Francois Louvre watch and the Quantium watch, which I possess. This is probably around this period, around the third oldest. These we're talking about within a few years difference. This was probably dating from 1794, as it was made for a competition which was running at that time. However, returning to our partnership of Olphin and Montandon, now André Olphin did have a background in textiles, and Balthazar was a watchmaker. Now, he, in the very early days, may have been bringing these watch movements from Switzerland. And this would have been for very similar reasons as with textiles from the Kingdom of Savoy. There were very lucrative tax incentives, or the lack of taxes, for these items coming from these remnants of the former Holy Roman Empire territories, as they were not regulated by French law. And so this kind of travel between the states of these borderland, these periphery areas, this was a semi-legal practice, which is often referred to as colportage, or the people who were engaged in this were colporteurs. Now, this term can be interpreted as peddling or as peddlers. However, this obtained an entirely different dimension. They would have been loading their donkeys with these goods and coming through the mountain passes and bringing the goods into France. This was entirely legal loophole, and it was extremely lucrative. This would have been a very big incentive to have partnered with Olphin, and Olphin's own son was not exactly the most reliable. Now, all of these men were Protestants. They were all of Swiss origin, and they also celebrated in the same religion, and they also were actively involved fighting for the rights to gather religiously. Now, I'd also like to point out that before I play this interview, or fragment of an interview with my friend Jacques Hauvette, who is the expert, I would like to mention that there are a lot of very curious overlays and coincidences with this whole history and these individuals. Now, it will be recalled that I went to the cemetery of Montmartre to find the grave of Balthazar. Now, he later in life, by the 1820s, had relocated to Paris because both of his sons were engaged there in their professions. And he was buried in Montmartre Cemetery, Balthazar, in 1839. So I went to look for his grave, and I did not find his grave. I did find, however, Frédéric Montandon. Now, Frédéric Montandon was a businessman who also sold watches, among many other things. He spent 10 years in Brazil, and I did find his grave. And very interestingly, I visited this home, which is a very nice villa in, this is south of Paris. This is an area where the rich of Paris would go to relax outside of the more polluted area of the capital. And as it turns out, Frédéric Montandon was renting the house where I visited, which is owned by this owner of a Balthazar Montandon and André Olphin watch. And as a matter of fact, Frédéric's wife, this would have been in 1857, on November 17th of 1857, Antoinette Clémentine Montandon née Guy passed away. She died in the house. So this, once again, I find myself in a house occupied by the wife of Frédéric Montandon. So everywhere I seem to be being visited by the ghosts of this Frédéric Montandon and now his wife. And not only that, however, the son of Balthazar, Auguste Laurent, who was the preacher at the head of the oratory of the Louvre, he actually married the son of Frédéric and Antoinette. This was Henri Francois, and Henri Francois was married by Balthazar's son in the Oratory Church. 3 months after this, Balthazar's son, Auguste Laurent, died. But he, once again, we have this interesting triangle and these liaisons, which are quite curious, that it all seems to come back to Frederic, which is very interesting. But there seems to be this nexus with Balthazar, his family, and obviously they were close cousins. So this is just a little bit of a note for record. And now I would like to play this fragment where we are speaking about colportage and colporteurs and the role of the Olphin family in bringing these tissus or textiles into France from Savoy. I think you'll find it very interesting.
He and Annecy were in the kingdom of Savoy, not in France at that time. So his family was first coming from the south of Grenoble and making clearly importing silk from Italy. But on the other side, you had many small workmen were installed then in Dauphiné, exactly like the worker for watches in the mountains around Neuchâtel. In Dauphiné, they were making the fabric, and the wool was coming from Spain through Clermont-Ferrand.
Okay.
So, going to Clermont-Ferrand, they could bring fabric from Dauphiné and bring back the wool.
It's interesting, and it seems many of these commercial businessmen, they were masters of many trades. And,
Yes. And they were, especially they were used to bunkers' habits, because they were needing a lot of money. Going to Italy to buy silk was very expensive, and they had to bring the money. So they had to borrow the money before going in Italy, and to reimburse it after selling the silk in Geneva or in the French mountains. And they were real commercial people, not workers, but the sellers, good sellers.